The means of defense against foreign danger have been always the instruments of tyranny at home. The advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only guardian of true liberty. I believe there are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations. Philosophy is common sense with big words. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. The truth is that all men having power ought to be mistrusted. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Equal laws protecting equal rights, the best guarantee of loyalty and love of country. I cannot undertake to lay my finger on that article of the Constitution which granted a right to Congress of expending on objects of benevolence the money of their constituents. Charity is no part of the legislative duty of the government. History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. Religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind, and unfits it for every noble enterprise, every expanded prospect. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. Democracy is the most vile form of government. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power knowledge gives. Where an excess of power prevails, property of no sort is duly respected. No man is safe in his opinions, his person, his faculties or his possessions. Liberty may be endangered by the abuses of liberty as well as by the abuses of power. All men having power ought to be distrusted to a certain degree. As a man is said to have a right to his property, he may be equally said to have a property in his rights. They throw that light over the public mind which is the best security against crafty and dangerous encroachments on the public liberty. The operations of the federal government will be most extensive and important in times of war and danger. Those of the state governments, in times of peace and security. Let me recommend the best medicine in the world: a long journey and a mild season through a pleasant country in easy stages. The means of defense against foreign danger historically have become the instruments of tyranny at home. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance. Liberty is to faction what air is to fire. Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. Liberty may be endangered by the abuse of liberty, but also by the abuse of power. If tyranny and oppression come to this land, it will be in the guise of fighting a foreign enemy. Religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind and unfits it for every noble enterprise, every expanded prospect. The Senate ought to be so constituted as to protect the minority of the opulent against the majority. The censorial power is in the people over the government, and not in the government over the people. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. Experience is the oracle of truth. If we are to be one nation in any respect, it clearly ought to be in respect to other nations. In no instance have the churches been guardians of the liberties of the people. But what is government itself, but the greatest of all reflection on human nature? We should never think of separation except for repeated and enormous violations. The presidency alone unites the conjectures of the public. Where we see the same faults followed regularly by the same misfortunes, we may reasonably think that if we could have known the first we might have avoided the others.